The Galactic Council was an assembly of the universe's most powerful and influential species, each representing the vast corners of the galaxy. For centuries, these species had ruled over the stars, trading resources, making treaties, and maintaining an uneasy peace. At the top of their ranks sat the Council's elders, wise beings who had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Yet, in their eyes, humanity was a fledgling race, a newcomer among the ancient empires. Their reputation for diplomacy and civility had earned them a seat at the table, but little else. Ambassador Leora Drake of Earth sat at the head of the human delegation, her calm demeanor a reflection of the deep sense of responsibility she felt. She had spent years preparing for this moment, studying the customs and politics of the other species, learning their languages, and perfecting the art of negotiation. The human race had earned their place in the Galactic Council, but now, Leora feared that would be tested. The meeting today was to discuss a new planet, a recently discovered world on the edge of the galaxy, rich in resources. The planet had already caught the attention of several of the council members, each eager to claim it for themselves, but the planet was also within Earth's designated territory. Humanity had spent decades exploring the stars, expanding their presence, and now they sought their share of the universe's wealth. Leora's team was prepared. They knew that negotiating with the council would be no easy task, especially with the older species like the Vorak and the Zerka, who had grown accustomed to getting their way. But humanity's emergence in galactic affairs was a cause for optimism. They had played the diplomatic game with respect, always adhering to the council's rules, always polite and accommodating. The humans had earned a reputation for their courteous mode, an approach designed to avoid conflict at all costs. It had worked, for now. The representatives of the various species sat in their designated seats, each one displaying a mix of curiosity and skepticism as they looked toward the human delegation. Leora noticed the way the Vorak ambassador, Zoran, eyed her with thinly veiled disdain. It was a look she had become familiar with, but one that still managed to sting. The Vorak were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and they saw humanity as little more than an upstart civilization trying to make its mark. The meeting began and Leora stood with poise, presenting Earth's case for the planet. She spoke of humanity's peaceful intentions, their desire for cooperation, and their plans for sustainable development. She emphasized that they did not wish to upset the delicate balance of the Council's existing territories, but instead sought a fair partnership. Her words were measured and thoughtful, carefully crafted to avoid confrontation, but as she spoke, Leora could see the reaction of the other delegates. The Zerka ambassador, a towering insectoid creature named Takara, let out a low, dismissive hum. "Your people are young," she said, her voice cold and mechanical. "You may think your intentions are noble, but this planet holds value beyond your comprehension." The words hit harder than Leora had expected. She had always known the Zerka viewed humanity as an insignificant player in the galaxy, but hearing it spoken so bluntly unsettled her. She glanced at the human delegation. They too were waiting for her response, their eyes filled with silent support. This was her moment to maintain the human reputation for patience and grace, to stand firm in their desire for fairness. "Ambassador Takara," Leora said calmly, "we understand the importance of this planet. Humanity is aware of its potential. But we also believe that as members of the Council, we all have a responsibility to ensure that new worlds are shared equitably. We ask only for a fair portion, nothing more." The council chamber fell silent for a moment, the air thick with the weight of the words. Leora's diplomatic tone was impeccable, but she could feel the tension building. Zoran, the Vorak ambassador, leaned forward in his chair, his long, bony fingers tapping impatiently on the table. "You speak of fairness," Zoran said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But fairness, Ambassador, is a luxury that only those with power can afford. Your species has not yet earned the privilege of making demands." Leora's heart skipped a beat. She had expected some resistance, but this was more than she had anticipated. The Vorak were known for their arrogance, but this was different. This was a direct challenge, not just to her but to humanity itself. The rest of the council members were watching intently, waiting to see how the human delegation would respond. Leora took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. She knew that any sign of weakness would be exploited. She had prepared for this moment, but now that it had arrived, the reality of it weighed heavily on her shoulders. "We are not making demands, Ambassador Zoran," Leora replied, her voice unwavering. "We are asking for fairness, as is our right as members of the Galactic Council. We are not here to take what does not belong to us, but neither are we here to allow our rights to be trampled." The words hung in the air, and for a moment Leora thought she saw a flicker of respect in Zoran's eyes. But it was fleeting. The Vorak were not interested in fairness. They were interested in power. And the Zerka, too, seemed determined to assert their dominance. The other members of the council, while silent, made their own judgments. Humanity's courteous mode was beginning to fray at the edges. Leora knew that the council would test humanity further. This was just the beginning. But she wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. As the meeting continued, Leora could feel a shift in the room. The council members were no longer listening to her words as they once had. Instead, they were sizing humanity up, testing their resolve. And Leora could sense that this was the moment when everything could change, the moment when humanity's reputation would be tested like never before. Her thoughts were interrupted as the next speaker, the Arborean delegate, a tall, plant-based being, began to address the room. But Leora's mind was elsewhere, her gaze drifting across the table. She knew that this negotiation would define humanity's place in the galaxy, and she was determined to make sure that humanity's voice would be heard. The atmosphere in the Galactic Council chamber was tense, thick with the unspoken weight of countless gazes locked on the human delegation. For hours, Leora had maintained her composed exterior, playing the part of the diplomat. Yet behind her eyes, the brewing storm was impossible to ignore. The other species could sense it even if they couldn't name it. There was something different in the air, something beneath the polite words and polite gestures of the humans. Ambassador Zoran of the Vorak had been the first to show his true colors, his words dripping with condescension. He didn't believe. In fairness, didn't see humanity's request as anything more than a childish desire for validation. The Zerka delegate, Takara, wasn't far behind in her cold, clinical assessment of Earth's position. And now the rest of the council had grown silent, eyes glimmering with curiosity, skepticism, or perhaps even pity. Humanity was new here, yes, but were they truly prepared to stand their ground? Leora felt the shift deep within her. It was subtle at first, just a tiny crack in the shield she'd so carefully crafted over years of training and practice. The words of the other delegates continued to grow sharper, more dismissive. The fact that they weren't taking humanity seriously was becoming undeniable. She glanced at her team, her fellow human diplomats. They were all sitting in their seats, expressions neutral, waiting for her to lead them through this trial. They were counting on her to represent Earth, to hold the line, to remain the perfect example of what humanity stood for. But Leora knew the truth. They were pushing her to the edge. With every passing minute, her mind spun faster, calculating the risks of what might happen if she pushed back. Was humanity truly ready for this? Were they prepared to reveal what lay beneath the courteous mode, that thin veil of politeness they'd worn for years? The moment the veil slipped, there would be no going back. Once the council saw humanity's true strength, their perspective would never be the same. The silence in the chamber stretched on as Leora weighed her options. The Arborean delegate, a plant-based being named Darius, had just finished another lengthy monologue about resource management. His words were eloquent but hollow. His species had no stake in the planet, they just wanted the power to dictate how it would be used. "That's enough," Leora said, her voice soft but unmistakable in its command. It was a single sentence, but it cut through the room like a blade. The delegates all turned toward her. For the first time, they saw something new in Leora's eyes, something they hadn't expected. The calm, controlled ambassador was still there, But beneath it, something dangerous was beginning to awaken. Leora stood up, her hands flat on the table. The council was silent, awaiting her next move. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. "Ambassadors," she said, her voice unwavering, "we have heard enough of your rhetoric. You speak of fairness, of resources, and of alliances, yet none of you have once considered what it means for us, for humanity, who is caught in the middle of your games." The words hung in the air, sharp and pointed, but the delegation was already reacting. The tension had reached a tipping point. The usual polite laughter, the nods of agreement had vanished. Instead, eyes darted around the room, unsure of what to expect next. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to witness the price of that mistake. Zoran leaned forward in his seat, his expression unreadable. "You misunderstand, Ambassador Drake. This is not a matter of games, but of power, and your people have yet to earn the right to play." Leora's gaze narrowed, her hands clenched at her sides. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel the anger that had been bubbling beneath the surface. She had worked tirelessly to get humanity this far. She had spent years proving that Earth's people were worthy of respect. And now here they were being dismissed, belittled, as if their voices didn't matter. "I know exactly what it is, Ambassador Zoran," Leora said, her tone cool, but with an edge that made even the Vorak hesitate. "It's about power. But you are gravely mistaken if you think you can simply take what is ours, because we're still learning how to play by your rules." The room fell silent. It wasn't just her words. They felt the shift in her. The council had witnessed humanity's courtesy, their attempts to make peace, to fit into the galaxy's grand designs. They hadn't seen what happened when humans were pushed too far. Leora took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "We are not children. We are not some naive species that will back down when threatened. You think that because you have the power, you have the right to claim what is not yours, but you are wrong." The silence stretched longer this time. Leora's words had cracked the council's illusion of control. They had expected humanity to fold, to retreat into the safety of their politeness and diplomacy. But that would not happen. Not today. Her voice was steady now, the calm replaced with something more focused, more direct. Humanity has survived wars, plagues, and destruction. We have fought for every inch of progress we've made. We did not earn a place at the council's table by being weak. And if you think we will allow you to treat us as lesser beings, you are gravely mistaken. Zoran stood. His eyes narrowed in disbelief. "You speak as though you have some great power to back up your threats, but you are still young. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Leora met his gaze, not backing down. "Perhaps it's you who don't understand what humanity is capable of." At that moment, Leora realized that the council wasn't just underestimating her. They were underestimating humanity as a whole. They had assumed that polite gestures and diplomatic language were all that humanity had to offer. But that assumption was about to be shattered. Takara, the Zerka delegate, leaned forward, her insectoid eyes narrowing. "You threaten us with your words, Ambassador, but words do not change the facts. You still lack the power to alter anything." Leora smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You're right. But that doesn't mean we won't fight for what's ours." A ripple ran through the room. The other delegates exchanged looks, uncertainty written across their faces. The human delegation had become something they hadn't expected: dangerous, formidable, and unyielding. For the first time, Leora felt the full weight of what was happening. She wasn't just defending humanity's rights. She was laying the foundation for something much bigger. The galaxy was watching, and they were about to learn what happened when humanity's courteous mode was turned off. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the quiet rustling of robes and the soft clicks of alien limbs, as the delegates exchanged wary glances. Leora could feel the weight of their stares, but she remained unshaken. There was no going back now. The council had crossed a line, and humanity's patience had reached its limit. Zoran, the Vorak ambassador, had always been the one to voice his disdain for humanity the most openly. Yet there was something different in the air now. Something had shifted, not just in the human delegation but in the council itself. Leora could see it in their eyes. They were unsure, uncertain about how far humanity was willing to go. The Arborian delegate Darius shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his long green vines twitching nervously. "Ambassador Drake," he said carefully, his voice a calm yet uncertain hum. "You speak of fairness, but fairness is not something that is given freely in this galaxy. It is earned through power, influence, and action." Leora's lips curled into a slight smile, though it wasn't one of friendliness. "And yet," she replied, "humanity has already earned its place. You may not see it, but we have endured wars, plagues, and adversity. We have never backed down from challenges, no matter how great. The fact that we sit here today, equal, among the stars, is proof of our strength." The delegates grew quiet again. They weren't used to hearing such blunt words from a species they had once viewed as soft, inexperienced. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and it only grew heavier as Leora continued. "If you think that humanity's strength lies only in the weapons we wield, then you have misunderstood us," Leora continued, her voice cold and steady. "It lies in our ability to adapt, to innovate, and to stand tall in the face of adversity." Zoran snorted, his alien features twisting in derision. "Adapt? Innovate? Your species is young, Ambassador. How can you claim such strength when you've barely been a part of this galaxy for a century?" "Because we've faced every challenge thrown at us and we've come out stronger each time," Leora shot back, her voice unwavering. "We've been pushed to the brink of extinction, but we never gave up. If you think we'll bend to your will, you're sorely mistaken." A murmur rippled through the council members. They weren't sure what to make of this shift in the human delegation. It was clear now that they had underestimated humanity's resolve. This was no longer about polite negotiations. It was about something far more dangerous. Humanity had revealed a side they had kept hidden for far too long. Zoran's voice rose once again, but this time there was less confidence in it. "Your words are empty, Ambassador. Show us your power then. Show us that you are worthy of this planet." Leora's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Very well," she said, her voice quiet but filled with deadly intent. "If that is what you need to see, then let me show you." The human delegation stood in unison, a powerful display of unity that sent a shiver down the spines of the council members. Without another word, Leora gestured to the hollow projector in the center of the chamber. The lights dimmed, and a 3D map of the galaxy began to take shape in the air before them, showing the various star systems, including the one in question, the planet that had been the focus of the negotiations. Leora's fingers moved deftly over the controls, pulling up a series of detailed images and data streams. "This is the human fleet," she said, her voice calm but carrying an air of authority that had not been present before. "What you don't know, Ambassador Zoran, is that we've been preparing for this moment long before this summit. Earth may not have the military strength of your Vorak Empire or the technological dominance of the Zerka, but we do have something far more valuable." The images on the holoprojector shifted, showing advanced human ships, sleek, powerful, and armed with technology that the Council had not anticipated. These ships weren't just war vessels. They were symbols of humanity's ingenuity, of their ability to adapt and survive. The ships' designs were unlike anything the Council had ever seen, a perfect blend of military and scientific prowess. These ships could not only fight, but they could navigate through the harshest conditions, repair themselves, and communicate across vast distances without losing integrity. Leora turned to face the Council, her gaze piercing. "This is just the beginning. Humanity has spent years developing advanced technology not just for exploration, but for defense. We have the capability to defend this planet, and we will not hesitate to use it if forced." A ripple of surprise spread through the room. The Vorak, the Zerka, and the other members of the Council had assumed that humanity was weak, that their polite diplomacy was a sign of fragility. But now they saw it clearly. Humanity had been playing a game they had yet to fully understand. "I'm not threatening you," Leora said, her tone controlled but firm. "I'm showing you the truth. Humanity has the strength to stand on its own. We will not be pushed around. We will not be cowed by power or intimidation. If you want this planet, you will have to earn it, just like everyone else." Zoran's mouth opened, but no words came out. Takara, the Zerka delegate, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The Arborians, who had been so confident just moments before, now looked to each other, exchanging uncertain glances. Leora continued, her words slicing through the growing unease in the room. "We didn't come here to be pawns in your games or to simply accept what you decide for us. We came here to make our voices heard, to claim our place among the stars, and we will not back down." The tension in the room reached its peak. It was clear now that the Council had miscalculated. Humanity was no longer the quiet, compliant species they had once been. They were a force to be reckoned with. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was thick with uncertainty, with the realization that humanity's polite veneer had been shattered. The human delegation had shown their true strength, not in violence or threats, but in resolve, in the unwavering determination to protect what was theirs. Finally, it was Takara who broke the silence. "We have underestimated you," she said, her voice low, almost grudging. "It seems there is more to humanity than we thought." Leora nodded, her eyes never leaving the delegates. "You haven't seen anything yet." The room was still, charged with an electricity that hadn't been there before. The council members, who had once viewed humanity as a polite but insignificant species, now sat on the edge of their seats, their eyes glued to the human delegation. The show of strength had rattled them in ways they hadn't expected. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now, the entire Galactic Council was facing the consequences of that mistake. Leora Drake stood tall at the head of her delegation, her face calm, but with a steely determination that the Council had never seen before. The moment of politeness had passed. The facade was gone. What they were witnessing now was humanity's true nature, strong, intelligent, and unyielding. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. The Vorak ambassador Zoran opened his mouth to speak but hesitated, unsure of how to respond. For a moment it seemed like the entire council was frozen, each delegate caught in the same uncomfortable realization that humanity had just shown them the tip of the iceberg. What other surprises did the humans have in store? Leora could feel the weight of their stares. She had expected resistance, but now, as the seconds passed, it became clear that humanity's actions had planted a seed of doubt in the Council's mind. The respect, though hard-earned, was now palpable. They hadn't been forced to fight yet, but the Council understood that humanity would not hesitate to defend itself. They would not back down. "You've shown us your ships," Zoran said at last, his voice laced with reluctant admiration. "But ships are not the only measure of power. The galaxy is a vast place, and many of its most powerful species do not rely solely on weaponry. We rely on knowledge, influence, and the ability to maneuver in the complex web of galactic politics." Leora tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "That may be true, Ambassador. But knowledge and influence are only as strong as the will behind them. You can have all the resources in the galaxy, but if you lack the will to fight for them, then they are nothing more than tools. Humanity may not have the longest history in the galaxy, but what we lack in time, we make up for with determination." The room shifted as Leora's words settled over the council members. Takara, the Zerka ambassador, gave a low hum, a sound of contemplation. Darius, the Arborian, remained silent but seemed to be calculating something, his long, vine-like arms resting on the table. It was as though they were seeing humanity in a new light. The quiet, polite species that had once been welcomed into the council was no longer the same. Humanity had turned a corner, and now they were no longer the underdogs, they were players. Zoran's voice broke the silence again. "You speak of determination, But it is not just power that will determine who holds sway over this planet. There are many factors in play, Ambassador Drake. Our interests are vast, and your people are one of many to be considered. Leora nodded, her expression unchanging. Of course. But as you said, Ambassador, power isn't the only factor. The true measure of strength lies in one's ability to unite and inspire others. Humanity has already begun to do that, and we have no intention of stopping now. Her words hung in the air, and the gravity of the moment was not lost on the council. Humanity was no longer seeking permission. They had drawn a line, one that no longer wavered. The tension in the room was palpable, but it was different now. It wasn't the oppressive weight of uncertainty. It was the simmering energy of respect. Humanity had made its stand, and the council had no choice but to recognize it. I think we all need a moment to consider this, Darius, the Arborian, said quietly, his voice like the rustling of leaves in a breeze. What we are witnessing here today is not just a shift in power, but a shift in the way the galaxy will operate moving forward. Humanity is not the same as it was when it first joined the Council. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider how we interact with Earth. Leora nodded. She had been expecting this. The Council would need time to process what they had witnessed. It wasn't just the ships. They had seen humanity's power, not only in technology, but in the spirit that drove them. That was something the Council had failed to understand until now. We've always known that humanity was capable of more, Leora replied, her voice calm and composed. We didn't come to the table to be underestimated. We came because we wanted to be a part of something greater. But if the Council cannot respect that, then we will not hesitate to act on our own. Her words echoed in the chamber, carrying a weight that seemed to press down on the delegates. For the first time, they were fully aware that humanity was not a race to be ignored. The quiet, polite species had evolved into something far more formidable. The council members were beginning to see the true potential of humanity, not just as diplomats, but as warriors, leaders, and innovators. Humanity had a strength that was different from the other species. It wasn't just in their technology or their military might. It was in their ability to inspire, to unite, and to stand firm in the face of adversity. The council's gaze shifted. Once more, each member now fully aware that their negotiations with humanity were no longer about domination or submission. This was a new era, and it was one that they would have to navigate carefully. No longer could they treat humanity as a mere pawn. The human delegation had made it clear that they were players in their own right. As the session continued, the tension in the room began to shift from uncertainty to something else. Calculation. The delegates were now sizing each other up, measuring their next moves. For the first time in a long time, the Council was not in complete control. Humanity's strength had disrupted the balance, and now, no one knew how the next chapter of the galaxy's history would unfold. Leora could feel the shift. The power was no longer in the hands of the old established species. It was being shared. The respect had been earned, not through violence, but through resilience. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were no longer a species to be dismissed, that they were here to stay. And no one would forget the lesson they had learned today. The Council might have had the advantage of centuries of experience, but humanity had something they could never replicate, an unbreakable spirit that could not be silenced. This was only the beginning. This part further establishes humanity's rising power and influence within the Galactic Council, showing their ability to adapt and challenge the established order. Let me know if you'd like to adjust anything or if you're ready to move on to the next part. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was deafening. It had been hours since the last words had been spoken. The room, once filled with the hum of tense discussions and political maneuvering, was now heavy with anticipation. The human delegation had made their stand, showing the Council not only their strength but their unwavering resolve. The rest of the galaxy had witnessed it, and the Council could no longer ignore the shift in power. Leora Drake stood tall, her expression calm but determined. Her earlier words had set the tone for this moment. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Council had tested humanity's limits, pushing them further than they ever should have. But now, they had seen the cost of that mistake. Across the room, the delegates from various species shifted uneasily in their seats. The Vorak ambassador Zoran sat with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes watching Leora with a mixture of respect and frustration. The Zerka representative Tukara remained still, her insectoid features betraying nothing. But Leora knew that beneath her calm exterior, the Zerka were considering their options carefully. The Arborians, once sure of their influence, now sat in quiet deliberation. Humanity had shaken them all. The time for talks was nearing its end. The Council had insisted that humanity's claims to the newly discovered planet be reviewed in further meetings. But Leora knew it was now or never. The Council had made one final attempt to test humanity's resolve, but she had already seen their true colors. They weren't interested in fairness. They were interested in power, and humanity would not give in to that. Leora stepped forward, her boots clicking sharply on the polished floor as she approached the center of the chamber. Her voice when she spoke was clear and firm. "I will not sit here and allow this debate to go on any longer. Humanity has been patient, yes, but our patience has limits." The council delegates turned to face her. The tension in the room thickened. Every eye focused on Leora as she spoke with the calm authority that had become a trademark of her leadership. "Do you understand what it means to test a people who have fought for every inch of their existence?" she continued. "We didn't come to this table to beg for scraps. We came here to be treated with the same respect as every other species. And if you cannot grant us that, then we will take matters into our own hands." The delegates looked at each other, exchanging quick glances. Some of them opened their mouths to speak, but the words never came. The room was too charged, too filled with the weight of what Leora had just said. Zoran was the first to recover, his voice low but carrying an edge. "You are playing a dangerous game, Ambassador. This planet is not just yours for the taking. There are many forces at play here, forces far beyond your understanding." Leora raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? You think humanity is incapable of understanding the stakes at play here?" She paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. "Perhaps you forget that we have survived things you would never imagine, wars, crises, and challenges you would find impossible to comprehend. We've fought against impossible odds and emerged stronger. We've done this not because we are lucky, but because we are determined." The room grew even quieter, the tension palpable. The Council had underestimated humanity's resolve, but now they were beginning to understand. The humans were no longer just diplomats, they were warriors, not with weapons in their hands, but with the strength of their will. The will to survive. The will to never back down. Takara's voice broke the silence, her words cold and measured. "We cannot simply allow you to take what you claim is yours. The interests of the Council are too great, Ambassador. Our alliance must be preserved." "Your alliance?" Leora asked, her voice dripping with quiet irony. "Is that what you think this is about? An alliance? You call it an alliance, but you've treated humanity as though we are nothing more than pawns on a game board. You think we are so naive, so willing to bend to your will." She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "But let me tell you this. Humanity will never kneel to you. Not now, not ever." A ripple of shock spread through the room. The council members were staring at her as if they had just seen something they didn't understand. Something dangerous. Takara shifted uncomfortably, her large black eyes narrowing as she processed Leora's words. Darius, the Arborian delegate, spoke up next. "Ambassador Drake, this is not just a matter of your strength or your will. This is a matter of the future. If the Council fractures over this, it could change the balance of the entire galaxy." Leora nodded solemnly. "I understand that, Ambassador Darius. But we have already seen the consequences of your failure to act with respect. If the galaxy cannot respect humanity, then we will find our own way. We will not allow our people to be trampled any longer. We will fight for what is ours." The room was silent again, but this time, It was a silence filled with respect. Humanity had made its point. It had drawn its line in the sand, and the council could see that crossing it would come at a high price. Finally, Zoran spoke again, his voice quieter, tinged with an almost reluctant respect. You have made your position clear, Ambassador. But understand this. This is not something we can easily give you. The Council's interests in this planet go far beyond just one species. Leora's expression remained unchanged, but her voice was firm. Then we will take our claim to the next step. If the Council cannot recognize humanity's rights, we will find others who will. There was no turning back now. The Council had seen humanity's strength, its resolve, and its unyielding spirit, and they knew that they could no longer treat humanity as a lesser power. Leora's words had marked the end of the old order. Takara's voice was low, almost resigned. Perhaps it is time for us to reconsider our approach. Zoran nodded slowly, the realization settling in that the balance had shifted. Perhaps. Leora stood tall, her eyes sweeping across the council members. If the galaxy is going to change, it will be because humanity led the way. The room was still, but the air had shifted. The council had been forced to recognize humanity's strength, and that was a victory in itself. The negotiations were far from over, but humanity had made it clear they would no longer be ignored. The silence that followed Leora's final words was unlike any silence the council had ever known. The weight of her declaration hung heavy in the air. Humanity was no longer just a player at the table. They had carved their place with boldness and strength, and the council could no longer pretend that they were anything less than equal. The balance of power had shifted, quietly but irrevocably. Across the chamber, the delegates shifted in their seats, exchanging glances filled with uncertainty and understanding. The same species that had once regarded humanity with skepticism, even disdain, now saw them in a new light. It wasn't just the human ships or the technology. It was the unyielding spirit, the strength of will that they had witnessed in Leora's words. Zoran, the Vorak ambassador, was the first to break the stillness. His voice, once dripping with arrogance, was now laced with reluctant admiration. You have made your point, Ambassador Drake. But the question remains. What do you truly want? Leora stood tall, her eyes unwavering as she met the Vorak's gaze. What we want is simple. Humanity wants to be treated with the same respect that is afforded to the other species of the Council. We do not seek to dominate or destroy. We seek equality, fairness. Zoran scoffed but said nothing more. He had seen enough to know that humanity's strength wasn't just in their ships or weapons. It was in the fire that burned within them, i.e., fire that could not be extinguished by threats or intimidation. Takara, the Zerka ambassador, who had remained silent throughout most of the confrontation, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, yet tinged with something resembling respect. Perhaps we have underestimated you, Ambassador. Humanity's resolve is not something we can ignore. Leora nodded, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She had fought hard for this, for humanity's place at the table. But it wasn't just about one victory. It was about what came next. The true test lay not in this moment, but in the decisions that would follow. The Council will need time to reflect, Darius, the Arborian delegate said thoughtfully. His long green vines twitched as he spoke, and his voice carried the wisdom of his species. We are a body of many species with many interests. What humanity has done today is force us to reconsider everything. Perhaps it is time we reassess our approach to the balance of power in the galaxy. Leora's lips curled slightly into a smile, but it was not one of triumph. It was a smile born of understanding. She knew that this moment, while powerful, was only the beginning. The Council might have seen humanity's strength, but now it was time to see if they could truly coexist with a new kind of power, a power that came from unity, not dominance. You're right, she replied, her voice steady. This is just the beginning. The galaxy has always been about power, yes, but humanity has shown that it is capable of so much more. We are capable of cooperation, of finding common ground, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And we will continue to do so. Her words resonated in the chamber, and for the first time the delegates seemed to truly listen. It wasn't just a matter of power anymore. It was about the future of the galaxy, and humanity's place within it. Zoran shifted in his seat, his gaze no longer condescending but filled with something more akin to contemplation. Perhaps it is time for a change. Perhaps humanity's voice needs to be heard more clearly. Takara's wings fluttered slightly, a sign of agreement. Yes, she said. The galaxy cannot remain in the hands of the few. We are many, and we must learn to work together, not just for our own benefit but for the future of all. Leora's gaze swept across the council. There was no longer hostility in the air. There was uncertainty, yes, but there was also something new. Hope. Hope that this moment would mark the beginning of something better, something that would allow humanity to thrive alongside the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species. Humanity has always believed in the power of cooperation, Leora said, her voice soft but firm. We believe that it is not power alone that shapes the future, but the ability to come together, to find solutions, and to respect one another's differences. She turned to face her delegation, her team. They had fought hard to reach this point, and now it was time to ensure that their victory wasn't just about one planet, but about the future of humanity and the galaxy. Today we've shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated, Leora continued, her gaze returning to the council. But we have also shown that we are not here to conquer or dominate. We are here to build, to cooperate and to grow, and we will not let anything stand in our way. The council was silent for a long moment, each delegate lost in their thoughts. The weight of the day's events had not yet fully settled, but already the air was beginning to change. The seeds of respect had been planted, and while it would take time for them to grow, there was no turning back. Finally, Zoran stood, his movements slow but deliberate. Perhaps the time has come for a new understanding, he said. Humanity's strength cannot be ignored, and perhaps it is time for the Council to recognize that. Perhaps we can work together, for the good of all. Leora nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. The journey had not been easy, and the road ahead would still be difficult. But humanity had taken its first true step into the future, a future where they would be recognized not just for their politeness but for their strength, their ingenuity, and their willingness to stand firm when it mattered most. This is not the end, Leora said, her voice steady. But the beginning of a new era. The galaxy has changed today, and humanity will be at the forefront of that change. And with that, the delegates began to rise, their movements slow, contemplative. The council had seen the truth of humanity, and in doing so, they had learned something important. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong dominated the weak. It was a place where strength came from unity, from cooperation, and from the willingness to stand together. And humanity had shown them that.